guys, it's Martin from Voyager Project here. How are you all doing? And a happy new year. I'm filming this on December the 31st, so probably by the time most of you see this, it will be 2012. Hope 2011 has been great for you, and of course hope that 2012 is even better. Okay, welcome to episode 4 of A Quest for Tone. If you've seen any of the other episodes of this series, basically we're looking at different things that you can do, or different things that I've done to improve my tone, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways, just little things that we can tweak to get the best possible guitar sound. In this episode, we're kind of looking at the nitty-gritty, the infrastructure, and trying to eliminate noise, really. So, I'm sure most people, when they first start out playing, they use whatever cables they can get hold of. They just plug them together anyhow. You don't worry too much about the amount of noise that's being generated by your system, which is understandable. It's fair enough. But as you start to become a more mature player and delve deeper into tone, then little things like this start to become important. If you've got some really nice amps, some really nice pedals, a nice guitar, then you don't want to have tons of noise going on in the background. And there's different elements that we can look at that can really improve things. Cables are definitely one of them. Just thinking about the way we actually connect things together is another. And then some kind of noise suppression device, whatever you choose to do it, is another way of looking at things as well. So let's start out with cables. Now, generally, the most simple rig will have you'll have a cable going from your guitar to your amp. Okay, in that case, and in fact always that is the most important cable. Unless you have active pickups, unless you've got EMGs or Samuel Duncan blackouts, in which case it doesn't quite apply in the same way. It's worth spending a decent amount of money on the cable that goes from your guitar to the first thing in your chain, be it a buffered pedal or be it an amp. After that, it kind of doesn't matter anything like as much. It still matters a little bit. Rubbish cable will still sound bad compared with a good cable. But you generally want something that's good quality, because we're talking unbalanced signals, we're talking passive pickups, low impedance output, or high impedance. I always get confused which way around they are. But the important thing is that for some reason, from guitar to the first thing in the chain, cable really matters. Once it's gone past a buffer, so I think it must be high impedance, because once it's gone into a low impedance sort of system through a couple of pedals or whatever, it doesn't matter as much. So what do I use? Well, when I'm playing live, and I've got it in this case as well, I want a decent length cable. So I'm using an elusive cable. It's a big chunky cable, good quality jack, gold plated, although that's more a case of gold plated doesn't really affect the tone. What it does do is it just helps maintain a more reliable connection for some reason, just because it doesn't corrode. So, yeah, elusive cable. This one is enormous, so it's good for live. If I'm in the studio and I'm just going to plug straight into the board or straight into an amp, don't necessarily need such a long cable, so I might choose a shorter one made by, with a different kind of cable. But the advantage of the elusive is that it's really low capacitance, so I can run really long cable runs, this is 30 foot, without getting high frequency loss, which you would do with a cheaper cable, because they have much higher impedance quite often. Inductance, rather, I don't know, all fancy physics words. You wouldn't believe that I have qualifications in physics. Okay, so after that, what cables do I use? Well, for general patch cables and stuff and the wiring in my rack, I'm pretty much using this stuff. Here we have just a short 2 foot patch cable. It's orange in this case, but it's Van Dam. It's made by Van Dam, and it's low LC OFC instrument, low noise cable, lap spiral screen, don't know. Okay, well, what is it? Well, it's a spiral wound screen, so it's very flexible. You can pretty much tie it in knots and you're not going to break the screen. Some cheaper cables use more of a kind of woven screen that's not as flexible, or even a kind of foil. It's oxygen free cable, which basically just means that it's really packed really tight. It's got a double insulated core, so it's got a kind of semiconductor sort of foil layer, and then it's got plastic to insulate the core from the outer. It's really flexible, and I'm using all nitric jacks. Switchcraft are good as well. I like the nitric ones. They're pretty rugged, they're much easier to fit, much easier to swap out in the event of needing to do a quick repair. And everything's soldered. If you're using solderless cables, get rid of them. Seriously, they're rubbish. They will break at a gig. I don't know anyone who's not had a solderless cable break at a gig. The other thing to say is, if you're using cheap unbranded cables, get some decent ones. We're not talking a lot of money, but don't be tempted to buy anything by Monster, because they're vastly overpriced and they don't sound very good. Okay, the other cables that you might have in your rig are speaker cables. Again, I'm using Van Damme cable, speaker cable this time. I'm using 2 cores, no shield. You can't use, or you shouldn't use, an ordinary guitar cable for a speaker lead, even at low wattage. You could use it at a push if you're running, if you've got very short a time and you're only going to be playing for a short length of time, but you run the risk of it melting, it overheating, it blowing up your amplifier, so don't risk it. Always carry a spare cable, even if it's a really short one like this. Again, it's 2 foot long. I've got nitric right angle jacks on either end, and this is a 2 by 2.5mm cables. It's good thick stuff. You can get away with, for short runs under about 5-6 feet, you can get away with 1.5mm cable, but I would say for anything longer than that you're really looking for 2.5mm, particularly if you're using a high power amplifier or for when you're recording. You don't want any signal loss from your speaker cable. Again, you can spend thousands of pounds on speaker cable, you can spend pennies on speaker cable. Go for somewhere in the middle, something decent quality that's designed to withstand the road. Okay, so that's kind of it. The other thing that I would say is, from my pedal board to my rack, I'm running a pedal snake. They're available at pedalsnake.com and for various shops around the place. They're a multi-core cable designed for guitar. You can run power and signal and MIDI and whatever you want really up them. The only thing I would say is that they come with moulded plastic DIN plugs, which I'm not so fond of, so drop them off and put some locking connectors, nitric XLRs on there, and you're kind of on for a winner really. So that's what I've done on my pedal board and at the rack end as well. And as ever with any specialist like that, carry a spare. Okay, so that's kind of the cables. Infrastructure, we're looking at things, whether you're running a rack or a pedal board or whatever. First of all, you need reliable connection cables. If you can solder, make them yourself, you'll save a fortune. If you can't solder, learn. Buy decent jacks, decent cable, make them yourself, make them to the right length, not too short, you don't want them straining, not too long because you're just risking even a tiny little bit of signal loss. If every cable in your rig is 2 inches too long and you've got 20 cables, you're talking 40 inches, that's 3.5 feet nearly of extra cable that you don't need. And that will gradually impact on your high frequencies of your signal. Okay, so that's kind of the process to go through. If you're using something like a true bypass switcher, fantastic, like a RJM Effect Gizmo or something, GCX, Rocktron Patchmate, any of these things that enable you to cut chunks of your signal chain out and just bypass them directly when you're not using them, they will help your tone, because the signal only goes to the pedal, so therefore down the cables that go to the pedal when that pedal's in use. Otherwise you're just talking direct connections, no signal loss. So the final step of this kind of looking at tone really is thinking about noise. Now, if you've got a single coil guitar in particular, it's humbucker guitar, so it's not so much of a problem. You're going to pick up noise from lights, from passing taxis, power cables, you name it, there's going to be noise in your signal. How do you get around that? And in particular, how do you can kind of, noise that you hear while you're playing, as long as it's not too loud relative to the level you're playing at, you can kind of cope with. What you really don't want is when you stop playing, there to be a kind of horrid buzzing noise coming through. So how do we stop that? Well, I mean, the first thing to do is, if you've got a volume pedal in your effects loop of your amplifier, then put the hill down when you're not playing, so no sound coming out of that. Always run your volume pedal before your delays, so that you cut out the noise to your delays, but the note, if you want that note then to echo on, then you want the volume pedal first, so when you cut out the sound, the echoes will still go. Okay, so I would always advise, if you've got an effects loop, run the volume pedal in the effects loop of your amp, just again because it may able to pull down the preamp noise from your amp as well, particularly if you're running lots of gain. I'm not in this instance, so it's not so much of an issue. These amps are pretty quiet anyway. And the other kind of side of noise, other than pickup noise, which good quality cables will help with, make sure your guitar is well shielded, make sure you've got good pickups in the guitar, we've discussed that in another episode, is the noise generated from your pedals. Now, pedals can be pretty noisy, particularly if you've got lots of overdrive pedals. And if I start, if I go to single coil mode, then with nothing, all I've got is my Catalyst fuzz pedal turned like that, and I'm starting to hear some kind of hissing noise. Now, if I was to introduce a flanger to that, then hopefully you can hear there's a kind of background kind of noise to it. But while on, I've got really sort of high pitched squealy noise. And if I was to put on like a distortion pedal or something, then at that point that's pretty much unbearable. We don't want any of that. So there's a number of pedals that have come out recently, and not so recently, that will kind of help you to do this. The original one was the Boss NS2 noise suppressor. What we're looking for is a noise gate type pedal that's got a loop in it. So there's the Boss NS2, and then there's the ISP decimated G-string, and the MXR noise clamp, which is what I'm running here. Now what it does is it senses, you put it first in line, so before anything else your guitar goes into this pedal, so it detects when you're playing actual notes, and then any of your noisy pedals then go in the loop of the noise reduction pedal. So in this case I'm going guitar, not into noise clamp. The send from the noise clamp is going into my flanger, phaser, wah, vibe, overdrives, distortions, fuzz, boost. All the pedals I run before the amp, and then it's coming out of that back into the return of the noise clamp, and then the output of the noise clamp is going into the input of my amp selector. So absolutely everything that's run before the amp is in the loop. So if I turn this volume back up, what I'll do is I'll just let you hear the noise, and then what I'll do is I'll step on the noise clamp, and you'll hear that because I'm not playing anything on the guitar, it'll cut out the noise almost completely. Okay, so hopefully you heard there's quite a reduction in noise there. You're still hearing something, basically because I'm generating as much noise as I can with a flanger, a fuzz, a distortion, and of course with single coil pickups. But if I switch to humbuckers just then, a lot of the noise came. I've got the lighting in the studio is such that picks up on the single coils. When I'm recording, I tend to be at the other end of the room, which has different lighting and isn't as much of an issue. And odds of me ever running a flanger into a wah pedal, into a fuzz pedal, into a distortion is fairly slim. You can adjust the trigger as well on the pedal. You want it so that the quietest sort of sounds that you're likely to play still trigger it, still open the gate on the noise clamp, but at the same time you don't want to let any extraneous noise. It's not a lot you can do about sort of finger squeaks and stuff, they happen, but anything much beyond that you want to try and cut out. So if I now just turned off the flanger and the fuzz, I've just got the distortion pedal, turned up the volume, and there's nothing coming through until I then hit a note. And as you can hear, there's other than the echo going on, there's virtually nothing that kind of lasts beyond the notes I play. So finger squeaks and stuff will come through. There's nothing you can really do about that unless you have very, very gentle finger squeak, or unless you turn up the trigger so that it only comes through when you hit hard. Which maybe if you're playing a sort of heavy metal rhythm part, lots of chugging, you can get away with turning the trigger a bit higher so that it will cut more sound out, but then you lose the dynamics in your playing. So it's always a compromise. But in this case, this scenario works for me. So yeah, I've got the noise clamp on. What I'll do is I'll just again turn the noise clamp off. So that noise there is what I'm putting up with. If I didn't have the noise clamp in, again it's just distortion, there's no other sounds, it's just my DS1 Ultra from Keeley. And that's the sound I'm getting just on the bridge humbucker of Snowy here. And of course the problem is that because I'm generating, I've got a lot of delay on this sound, the noise is getting delayed too, so what that actually does is it muddies up the delay and makes the sound not as crisp as I want it to sound. So again, I'll just flick the volume pedal back up, step on the noise clamp, and you'll hear the difference. What I'll do is I'll play a little line, and then I'll step on the noise clamp, play the same line again, and you'll hear how much clearer hopefully the delays sound as well. So there you're actually hearing distinct delays, just the actual note coming through. And I can still play these out quietly and it'll still come through. So there we go, 3 stages to think about. Cables. Get good cables, don't overspend on strange esoteric things that are overpriced and don't help your tone, but do experiment, do try a few different cables out, make your own, or initially, certainly for the guitar to the first item in your signal chain, to that buffer, buy a decent one. Patch cables and any kind of interconnects in your rig, make your own so they're the right length. Use quality jacks, quality cable, use solder, learn to solder. Easiest thing in the world to do, well hardly, but it's not difficult at all. Get a decent 25 watt soldering iron, you don't need anything more powerful than that, with a decent fine spade tip. I think mine's an Antex, it was the tip it came with, works a treat. Decent solder, if you can get it, use lead solder. Make sure you're in a well ventilated space, but it does sound better than lead free solder for some reason. And then look at the way you've got things wired, and if necessary, or if you just value your tone, so in which case it is necessary, get some kind of noise reduction device, noise clamp, NS2 noise suppressor, or a ISP decimator, to cut out the unwanted sounds and still let all the good sounds through. The advantage of this kind of noise device over just a standard noise gate is because it senses the original guitar signal. You're gonna get the notes through. It's gonna hear what the notes are you're actually playing. It is important, obviously, because of the way it works, that any delays and such things run after the device. But if you're running them in an effects loop anyway, or something similar, then that'll be good. If you run a delay in the loop, at the moment I've got my carbon copy in the loop because I need to do a bit of a rejig because I've got some new pedals. Then if that it cuts off the delays because you're not getting the guitar signal. So always run your noise clamp with all your noise making pedals, so any modulation pedals, any overdrive distortion pedals, and your wah pedal. You could put a compressor before it, or you could put a compressor in the loop, that's entirely up to you, but delay pedals run after it, and obviously run it before your amp. Doesn't mean a noise gate isn't also a valuable tool, where I would put a noise gate in my signal chain, and I'm hoping to do so as I'm gradually expanding the rig, is to stick it before the volume pedal in the effects loop chain, so that then it is cutting out any excess noise from the amplifier. But that would be a conventional style noise gate, as opposed to the something like the noise clamp, which sort of senses the guitar input. Okay, now if you've got any questions about anything I've said in this or any of the other episodes, please don't hesitate to ask me. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Encourage others to subscribe, and if you've got any ideas of what you want me to cover next in the new year, then we'll get onto that too. Other than that, thanks for watching. This has been episode 4 of A Quest for Tone. I'm Martin Cliffe from Voyager Project, and I will see you next time. Happy New Year.